from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Happy to be here with you this Wednesday night. Welcome to the program. Here's the phone number if you want to join our late night national town hall conversation. Give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4Valdez. And in the big story today, we've got Joe Biden, our president, Joe El Baboso Biden, as he's affectionately known on this program. He's canceled student debt for 150,000 borrowers. And I always say, will I be one of the lucky recipients? I don't know. But the Biden administration announced today that they are forgiving a total of $1.2 billion in student debt for just under 154,000 people. And we have a clip of audio from President Biden. Listen to this. Or maybe
this kind of relief can be life-changing for individuals and for their families. And it's good for the economy as a whole. By freeing millions of Americans from the crushing debt of student loan programs, it means they can finally get on with their lives instead of their lives being put on hold. They can think about buying a house, starting a home, starting a family, having a family future that they can enjoy, or saving for the family's future, saving and being put away a little bit of money. I'm proud to have been able to give borrowers like so many of you the relief you earned. I promise you I'm never going to stop fighting for hardworking American families. So if you qualify, you'll be hearing from me shortly. Thousands of people per month are eligible, about $25,000 a month, or every 2 months will be paid on a $50,000 basis, but are eligible for relief, and they'll get a letter from me letting them know they're qualified. And when they get that letter, your debt's going to be forgiven.
Wow, it's like Christmas in February. Joe El Baboso Biden strikes again. And let me tell you, while I don't agree that we should do this, I don't believe that this is a good idea. People, made these plans. They got into these commitments. I'm one of those people. I went to New York University. I took out loans, a lot of money, and I fully expected to pay it back. And it takes a long time to pay it back. And I still have some of that debt that I owe. So, of course, I say I hope I'm one of the lucky recipients of this debt, but not something that I think the government should really play a hand in. But let's stop for a moment and think about how attractive this is when you're a regular person and you hear this stuff and you think to yourself, man, that's great that I can go to school for free. I love Joe El Baboso Biden, right? That's what a lot of people are thinking when they hear that they don't have to make their $300, $400, $500, $600, $700 a month payment. Now, of course, it's going to be on the backs of other taxpayers because the government doesn't really have any money. Right? They've what's the word here? They didn't purchase these loans, but they've made them Department of Education loans, so they're part of the Department of Education, right? And, the argument that they're making is that they're forgiving the debt, that the debt disappears. But does the debt really disappear? I mean, this has already been paid for. This is, these lenders are guaranteed, right? It's called a guaranteed student loan, so the lender has to be paid back. Now, unless the government's cutting a deal with the lender and saying, look, no, we decided they don't have to pay you, then the lender's out the money. Right? Now, maybe it's not the taxpayer that's paying, but now the lender's getting robbed. Either way, somebody's short here because the school got paid. And that's the part that I just don't understand, how this whole cancellation of debt works. They make it sound so fancy. And then he makes it sound so benevolent when he gets on there and he says, you've been working really hard. You've earned this. You've earned it. Come on. Listen, I think I work hard. I don't think I've earned for anybody else to pay my student loans but me. I mean, if it was a perk of a job, that'd be nice. But listen, I knew what I was getting into, and it is what it is, right? But he didn't stop there. He went on to say that student debt cancellation, it also helps people who didn't go to college. Now, this is where it's a hard sell. Listen to this.
Look, folks, and it's also helping you who don't go to college. It's not just, people say to me sometimes, well, Joe, that's great. You're helping people get into college. But how about all those hardworking people you grew up with in the neighborhood? How about all those folks in labor unions? How about all those hardworking people who work with their hands? Why should they have? Well, just today, my labor department announced this is not the student loan program, but $200 million in grants for registered apprenticeship programs around the country, while you can learn a skilled trade and lead to good paying jobs. Everybody thinks if you're an electrician, you say one day, I want to be an electrician. And you got to go to school, basically. And these apprenticeship programs are 4 and 5 years before you qualify to have a license. They work like hell to get these licenses. And guess what? If you work with your hands, you ought to be able to make a decent living. And that's why they're doing it now with my position on organized labor. So it matters.
So it's a 1-2 punch. Not only is he saying, look, we're going to take care of your debt so you don't have to pay back your student loans. You just got a raise in life. Super. And by the way, we're working on all these apprenticeships and infrastructure plans. And before you know it, you could be out there welding. I mean, this is a blue-collar dream, right? Sounds like an election day ploy. Can he pull it off? I mean, he'll pull off whatever he wants. He makes money out of thin air and puts the onus on everyone, not just those that are involved. And that's really where I don't agree with this. But I'm not going to reject the relief of my loan. I don't think you can anyway. If you get selected, you get selected. I don't think you'd say, hey, by the way, could you not forgive my loan? I don't think that's an option. So if I get that letter, I apologize in advance. But this relief comes through something called SAVE, the Saving on Valuable Education Repayment Plan, which made changes to something called an income-driven repayment plan in the wake of a Supreme Court decision that told Biden you can't just go ahead and cancel debt. So they decided, well, we won't cancel the debt. We'll change the way they repay it by making you repay zero. And that's in effect what they've done, right? So the first batch of loan forgiveness through SAVE is planned for July. But the Department of Education identified certain eligible borrowers even sooner. So here's a quote from Miguel Cardona. He says, this plan reflects our unapologetic commitment to deliver as much relief as possible to as many borrowers as possible, as quickly as possible. Look at that. Now, Education Secretary Miguel Cardona also said that we're providing real immediate breathing room from an unacceptable reality where student loan repayments are competing with basic needs. Okay, so because our basic needs, because eggs and everything else went up in price, because you go to the supermarket and you get 2 bags instead of 4 for the same $150 or $200 that you were spending a couple of years ago during the Trump years. And because your basic needs are now competing with the money they're asking you for, they're giving you a break. I think maybe just control inflation, and then people can actually pay their bills. Anyway, under the SAVE plan, those who borrowed less than $12,000 can have their debt forgiven after 10 years of payments. Now, the thing is, these payments can be zero. So that really just means 10 years of debt. The Education Department will reach out next week directly to borrowers who are eligible for relief but are not currently enrolled in the SAVE plan. And this goes on to say, this is now Chuck Schumer, Senator Chuck Schumer. He says, we have to do more to cancel even more student debt. But today is a good day, and we applaud. Let me see if I can do it with a Chuck Schumer voice. And we applaud the administration for what they're doing. Anyway, folks, I want to continue our discussions tonight. I want to have a conversation with veteran broadcaster Lou Dobbs. He's scheduled to be with us a little bit later, and we're going to talk about what he's going to discuss at CPAC and to get his reaction to this student loan debacle, as well as everything else that's going on in America at night. So don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. I had somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right? But you're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back, familia. Rich Valdez with you till 1 a.m. And what a treat we have tonight to have veteran broadcaster. You know him from CNN, from Fox Business Channel. He's the host of Lou Dobbs Tonight. You can catch that on frankspeech.com. Lou Dobbs, welcome to the program, sir.
Great to be with you, Rich.
You bet. So I want to get a handle from you on what's going on. I talked a little bit earlier with a couple of my colleagues about some of the things that Trump was talking about last night at the town hall he had. And he said his revenge will be his success. And I think that's fantastic. And he also alluded to some names that are on this imaginary VP shortlist. And I think, I think you should be on it, number one. But some of the names,
of you, Rich.
some of the names I think are not too, I don't think it'll happen, like DeSantis and other things like that. But Kristi Noem, I think, is a solid possibility. I'm not sold on Tulsi Gabbard, but what do you think of this list, and have you heard of it?
Yeah, I've been looking at that just with this, I suppose, the same curiosity and putting my own valuation on it.
Yeah,
I think President Trump sort of he set the predicate for all of this when he said the vice president doesn't do much, doesn't mean much.
Right.
If I'm quoting him reasonably accurately. I think the vice president should mean something, and I think should be a significant asset to the administration. And I'm sure that he is thinking the same way, because he's gone through a vice president who was not aligned with him as Make America Great Again, as America First. And the reality is that that position can be important if it has a man or woman with immense talent, a great loyalty to him, and the principles of America First, because he is the only person in the Republican Party, and I'm not speaking just as a presidential candidate or a former president. He is the only intellectual basis for the existence of the Republican Party right now.
Yeah, I agree.
When you look at what is happening in the Senate, they muster 13 whole senators, Republican senators, who can demand a trial for Alejandro Mayorkas. That's pitiful. And you look
Right.
over to the House and you're talking about a two-seat majority. This is madness. It didn't have to be.
100%. And I've said that often, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I felt like the Republican Party kind of died toward the end of the Obama administration. There wasn't much left of it, and it was kind of just that permanent Washington class. And Trump came and breathed new life into something that was dying and kind of took over and brought in new people and made it a populist movement, and it is what it is today. And there's still people, maybe my former boss, Chris Christie, Nikki Haley, and others that are trying to hold on to a Republican Party that once was, but they're fighting the will of the people, right? We the people have spoken, and they're not looking to go back into that swamp route. So I think Trump's got his work cut out for him in that respect. But I agree with you. We should have somebody that is capable and able, and is also not going to get in the way and become a competitor of the president's. And I think there's always a risk of that, which is why my vote was for Lou Dobbs, right? I think you have your head on straight and you know what's going on. But in actuality, I think it's probably going to be somebody that has experience as a governor, like Kristi Noem, or that's really the only one I think that I see on the list that I'm looking at. So do you have a final pick on who you would, not who you would endorse, but who you think he might go with?
No, I think what I'm going to do is watch what he's thinking. And see what he judges, and his team, of course, judge to be the person who has the greatest talent and gifts and capacity to help him run the country. And I really think that has to be, I would love to see it be a true partnership with the vice president, whomever it is, because that would mean that person has the ability to really expand his reach and his authority across government And that's going to be, as you know, one of the big challenges is to restore the will of the people and the consent of the governed as somewhat important, at least to the permanent bureaucracy and the deep state. And yes, roll back the Marxist Dems to the point that they no longer can be, in my judgment, at least determinate about whether or not we have a border, be determinant and not whether we have 1,200 Americans in a gulag in Washington, D.C., with some of them, many of them, not having even had a trial set because they are those political prisoners, those hostages, as the president says, are frankly a symbol and a signal to the rest of America, and particularly to MAGA America, that don't you dare dissent, don't you dare buck the establishment and the Department of Justice. We're going to also watch a Department of Justice judging us next on what we think, what we feel. It's remarkable where we are. Just the other day, we had Jake Sullivan say to everybody out loud, we find the First Amendment not to be helpful to the national security interest of the United States. This man is out of his mind. He's a dullard. We knew that, but now he's bordering on insanity.
It's a difficult time to observe politics, Lou Dobbs, because so many people are really in it solely for self-dealing. I think in the past that was a part of it that people expected. That corruption could occur, and some people were tempted with it. But I feel like the majority of the people, especially those in power right now, self-dealing is where they live. That's their mainstay. And we're trying to get away from it. I don't know if we ever really get to drain a swamp, but I think our best shot at doing it is somebody who wants to drain the swamp. And there's only one guy out there saying he's going to drain the swamp, and that's Donald Trump. Same guy that they're trying to put in jail on 91 different felony counts and 100 or 400 years in jail and $400 million nearly in a fine. And they're trying to take his buildings away today because they're afraid he's not going to be able to pay. I mean, it's just absolutely insane what's going on. What do you ultimately think happens?
Well, I think, first of all, what we're seeing, Rich, is an awakening of the middle class in this country. We're seeing an awakening of certainly entrepreneurial small business people as to what happens when you decide not to vote, what happens when you decide that there's not really much difference between the two parties. Think about this. We haven't heard people talk about that very much. They haven't said, well, there's obviously no difference between the two parties. There is one party that bears absolute 100% responsibility for every disaster that we have seen unfold over the last 3 years. Opening the southern border.
Right.
An estimated 15 million illegal immigrants crossing that border into the United States, and we know not where they are, who they are, or what they're doing. We have a president who is obviously mentally impaired, cognitively impaired. Neurologically, he's not correct. We know that. It doesn't matter whether, excuse me, a doctor suggests a cognitive test or not. We know what we see.
You're right. We know exactly what we see, Lou Dobbs. Folks, we're coming right back with Lou Dobbs from Lou Dobbs Tonight. If you don't know him, shame on you. You should. He's a veteran in this game and worth listening to. We're coming right back with Lou Dobbs and me, Rich Valdez. Don't go anywhere.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
The question about score settling, a lot of women, a lot of women voters, they don't like the name calling, they don't like the score settling, they love your policies, and they just want Trump's policies, maybe not so much of the other stuff. So I think that's what the question, if you don't mind my asking, I think that's what she's getting at.
But also you want to say, how do you get together? We're going to get together through success. When the country was at a level that we had the best employment numbers in history, everything was good. And this country was coming together. Then we got hit with COVID, but this country came together. I don't care about the revenge thing. I know they usually use the word revenge. Will there be revenge? My revenge will be success.
That is, of course, the 45th president of the United States. I like to call him El Trompito de Naldus Magnus. And he was on Fox News Channel yesterday night with Laura Ingraham in a town hall saying the revenge will be his success. But one party frames this as, of course, revenge, and they won't let it go. Lou Dobbs is our guest. You know him from Lou Dobbs Tonight. He's been on TV for decades and has always had something very, very valuable to offer. And Lou Dobbs is also the host of the Great America Show with Lou Dobbs. Lou Dobbs, when you hear the Democrats characterize Trump's return as a revenge, I think it really strikes a chord on what you were just talking about, which is the difference between these two parties, which isn't that different after all.
Yeah, the two parties couldn't be more different. One is anti-American, and the other is America first. I mean, it's not only that the Dems do not want it to be America second, third, or fourth. They don't want it to be at all. And President Trump and his philosophy is make America great. He's already demonstrated he has a record. He doesn't just talk. He keeps the promises he makes. And it's interesting to hear Laura sort of load up that question, suggesting that, that women are just going to be, some sort of delicate a gathering of flowers who just can't handle tough talk and, rigorous thinking. I think that's, frankly, I think it's sexist on her part to suggest such a thing. I know that some would say, well, the demographics demonstrate that white women, college educated, are the weak spot. The fact is, if that's the basis of their judgment, then they have something to figure out, not President Trump, nor the rest of the Make America Great movement and the America First agenda. It's really remarkable, I think, Rich, to think what we're listening to and watching on media. And people have to remember, across the broad spectrum of corporate media, we're looking at pure propaganda. And a lot of people, I'm sure, just recoil at the very idea. But it's time that everybody grew up and understand where these messages are coming from, what is driving consumerism, what is negating individualism, what is, in point of fact, a nation right now that is bombarded by disinformation and misinformation campaigns. And by the way, that's your government speaking. And we have to understand that. The greatest attack on our minds, our consciousness, and our desires is from our own government running a propaganda campaign against the entire nation, more so than they do even Russia, China. It's amazing to me to see how many people, to find out so many people are still unaware of what is happening. Think about this. Vladimir Putin invades Russia 2 years ago, February 24th, and we just happen to be moving right up to that. And here we are 2 years later, and we watch with Tucker Carlson, Vladimir Putin giving a master class on Russian history and European history, and remarkably bright and learned and full of life. And this, we were told for 2 years that he was ailing after the invasion of Ukraine. Then we found out he's really sick with some sort of mysterious disease. He's failing in health, we were told again by the CIA. And then we're told he's on his deathbed from cancer. And the next thing we know, we see him up on Tucker Carlson, brilliant, articulate, with depth and command. And then we look over at the other channel, whatever channel you look at, let's say MSNBC, and there is our president, Joe Biden, stumbling up an airplane. There is Joe Biden, who cannot put together a coherent sentence to save him, has to be assisted to a lectern or up a stage. And when he does say something, it's a mumble, it's a jumble. And it's beyond a word salad because there's no way to dress it up. The man is impaired cognitively, mentally, and he's compromised. And no one can say with any degree of honesty and a factual base that he is not compromised and that he is not incompetent and fully unfit for the presidency.
Well said, Lou Dobbs. I think Joe Biden has put America in peril in numerous ways, both his foreign policy, his domestic policy, his forgiveness of student loans. You name it, he's just spending money like it isn't his. Well, because it's not his. And he just prints more and more of it out of thin air and just contributes to inflation and puts us right back on the track to where we're trying to get away from. And my hope is that that'll stop. But I'm presuming that these are some of the things that you address on the Great America Show with Lou Dobbs. Tell us about the podcast.
Well, the podcast, thank you, Rich. The podcast is the Great America Show, and it is on all podcast platforms. You can get it through LouDobbs.com as well. And we're very proud of the podcast, and we bring, I think, a in-depth thinking from some of the smartest people in the country, in my opinion. And some of the most important folks on Capitol Hill to talk about the policy issues and the politics of it all. And I hope everybody will give it a listen.
And if people want to check it out, is there a website specifically, just LouDobbs.com, or is there one specifically for the Great America Show?
Well, there's the Great America Show does have a landing page, but just go to LouDobbs.com and you can look at the smorgasbord of media properties.
Yeah, well, I was just on there the other day actually, and I was sharing one of the articles you had on LouDobbs.com, and I said, man, that's something that I didn't see everywhere else. So there's a lot of good information on there. Check it out, folks. And Lou Dobbs, you're at CPAC this week, and I know you're giving a big speech. We don't want you to spill the beans on what you're talking about, but what is the vibe over there, and what are some of the things that you think you might be touching on?
Well, we'll definitely be touching on this political year, this presidential election year. And we're going to talk to a large degree about the difference between the two parties. And we're talking about that attitude that there's no difference between the two parties. I think both parties and folks who call themselves Democrats or Republicans understand clearly there is a vast chasm between the two parties. One has to take responsibility for the fellow we were just talking about. What party, in its right mind, with the interest of the nation at stake, with the welfare of its citizens primary and proximate, what party would possibly put Joe Biden on the top of the ticket? And why would they do so? Because he, by the way, while he is impaired and is cognitively now in rather rapid decline, he was the same fellow in 2020, and they knew it. That's why you didn't see him campaigning. They were hiding him, and he didn't go out on the campaign trail. And when he did go out, you remember there were there were always fewer people than there were members of the press corps to
all
greet him.
5 of them. Yep.
And the next thing we know, he's got 80 million votes. And I'll let people make their own decision about what that means in terms of the election. But the reality is the CIA, the U.S. military, the State Department, the NSA, and the intelligence community have combined to wage a war on Donald Trump. We are now in the 9th year of the attack on Donald Trump. And it's only because he brought policies and leadership to the United States that was absolutely oppositional to everything that the military-industrial complex wants. They want war. They want a robust and aggressive foreign policy. Make America great again and America first means we have a modest policy. We don't want our troops in Europe. We want Europe's troops in Europe. And we want them to be responsible for the safety and security of the European Union. It makes only sense. The same way with the region, the regional issues in the Middle East. We are first and foremost committed to the state of Israel. It is the largest democracy in the Middle East. It is a nation that we will support, as far as I'm concerned, forevermore. And the idea that suddenly in this country we see tens of thousands of people that say they're pro-Palestinian, when we're talking about Gaza, and when we're talking about the fact that Gaza elected Hamas to be their government, their leaders, we're talking about utter nonsense. And for this administration to embrace that is sickening. And to say to Benjamin Netanyahu, for example, no, we have a better way of fighting. We want you to take the ceasefire, which will, of course, benefit no one other than Hamas. And we haven't won a war in decades. You have to go back to the Persian Gulf to see a win. We were just a disaster in our withdrawal from Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan. So we have to focus on what the Democrat Party is responsible for. And it is responsible for so much evil and so much decline that we're witnessing in our major cities, across our borders, both north and south.
Yeah. You know, Lou Dobbs, few put it out there as well as you do, but you are a wealth of information, a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. Folks, make sure you check out Lou Dobbs, his Great American Show with Lou Dobbs. That's a podcast. Subscribe wherever you can. Check out the website, loudobbs.com. You can also check out Lou Dobbs Tonight. That's on Frank's Speech. You can get it right there on the same website. I know I check it out as often as I can. It's a great program. And Lou Dobbs, you're a legend in the broadcast business. You're an inspiration to many of us. I want to thank you for being here. Godspeed to you at CPAC this week, sir.
Thanks so much, Rich. And it's awfully good of you to invite me, and enjoyed talking with you. And God bless you.
Thank you, sir. Folks, more to come straight ahead. Your calls and more. 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We go to the phones. Let's check in with Tom, giving us a call from Arizona, tuned in on KFNX. Tom, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Good evening, Rich. First of all, I just wanted to give you a call and let you know what a breath of fresh air that you are on the radio. I tend to listen to conservative talk shows all day, but I love the way you get guests from across the board.
Oh, thank you.
The real reason
that.
I was calling, hey, you're welcome. The real reason I was calling, you got me all fired up about the student loan forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
I actually ended up with about 700 credit hours, 5 degrees from Arizona State University.
Man, you're smart.
Paid, no, not apparently not. But paid for all of it, sometimes working 2-3 jobs, took out student loans.
Right.
I managed to piece it all together and retire as a professor from Arizona State University.
Nice.
And I have a pretty meager pension, but now I'm being asked to
pay for my loan.
Meager pension to pay back. Well,
and everybody else Biden's looking. I haven't been included yet. I got my fingers crossed that I'll be included. I don't think I will be, but yeah, I know what you're saying. You worked hard. You busted your tail. It took you, forever, a millennia to pay off everything. Working as a professor, probably adjuncting everywhere you could, and then all of a sudden, here you are. Joe Biden comes in and says, "You know what, Tom, Professor Tom, you're getting the short end of the stick. And you're not the only one, Tom, right? I think there's a lot of people that are feeling the exact same way that you are, because they're thinking, man, I busted my tail, and now everybody else gets a free ride.
Absolutely. One last point, the nail, the one that really drove it home, at ASU, in jest, I made a comment to my colleague, "Make America Great Again." After 32 years, they did not renew my contract.
I always tell people, but for the fact that I do what I do, and I literally get paid to talk about my political opinions, I don't know how anybody else manages to live life, because people are so sensitive. You say the wrong thing, if you listen long enough, you may have heard a story that I shared. I have my daughter's gluten-free in her diet, and I try to eat keto, and which is no sugar, no carbs, and whatever. And it's not easy to find a bakery that'll have brownies and cookies and all these things that are made from like crushed almonds as a flour instead of like wheat flour. And long story short, I went there, and I've been going forever, and I spend a considerable amount of money because they're more expensive, these pastries. Anyway, Tom, bottom line here is this woman, lovely woman, she asked me a question, how's the news business? And we're having a really nice, pleasant conversation. And then she says, you got to see this story about Trump. People think he's God now. And I said, oh, that sounds like a really good topic for the show. And we started talking, and I said, yeah, it's not so bad. And she said, people that are black and brown like you and me, we can't do that. We can't support Trump. And she just scolded me and told me that basically, my thinking was the problem. And she walked away from me in her own store. And I thought, my goodness, if this sweet woman, this elderly woman, is going to treat me like that, imagine what else awaits the rest of us.
I heard that story from you a couple weeks ago, but it was worth repeating for those folks that didn't hear it.
Yeah. Tom, thank you for the call. I appreciate it. God bless you, my friend, and keep up the good work paying off everybody's student debt. Everybody give Tom a round of applause. I say that in jest, but I appreciate the call. A big shout out to KFNX. We're coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So some people think, what is going on here? And is it because of Biden's cognitive ability? Could that be why he's forgiving student debt and he's doing all of this, what we would call crazy? No, of course not. This is typical electioneering, if you will, right? This is election year promises that he's willing to make and do what he's got to do in order to win. And ultimately, that's just how it is. And this is what we see time and again, right? We see it time and again. Anyway, I want to remind everybody that we're just wrapping up hour number one. Hour number two, action-packed, like a Steven Seagal or a Die Hard movie. Listen, we've got a conversation on climate and energy, one of our favorites, right? We're going to talk a little bit about that and how John Podesta may have influenced the recent pause on liquid natural gas. We'll talk about that. I also want to talk about a beautiful success story, an American dream story from a kid from foster care. And you don't want to miss that. All that's coming up, plus your calls and more in Open Phone America. 833-482-5337 is the number. Make sure you're tuned in and locked in. Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com is the website. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez, coming right back.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the program. If you want to join the show, it's 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And I want to get into a number of things tonight. Of course, there's a little pushback. We'll talk about this a little bit at the top of the next hour. But those that succumbed to the pressures of George Soros and many like him that created pro-crime progressive prosecutors that coddle criminals, well, there's some pushback. People are just tired of it, and they're tired of criminals getting their way. So we'll talk a little bit about what that backlash is looking like. Nikki Haley, of course, not going anywhere in the race. She says she's in it for the long haul until the American people close the door. And it seems the American people have closed the door, but she's still there. And I guess we'll find out this Saturday at the South Carolina primary. And what else do we got here? We've got James Biden and Joe Biden. That's a sticky situation that likely points to more criminality. And, of course, Biden is wiping out $1.2 billion in federal student loan debt in his latest attempt to buy votes. And those are some of the headlines that I'm looking at right now. But there's a couple other stories I want to get to, and one of them has to do with the Biden administration, in my opinion, likely accepting influence from their, I don't remember what his position was. He was some sort of like one step below the climate czar, John Podesta, and seemingly influenced this whole thing to, I'm not going to use the word suspend, but curtail some of the exports for liquid natural gas. And of course, this country saw, I'd say, the height of energy freedom, if you will, a couple of years back. And we've only seen it dwindle since literally a day or two after Joe Biden took office, and it's gotten worse and worse ever since. And there's a lot of debate out there. Many people say, no, we're producing more energy than we've ever produced before, and that's a lie. Yet there's no proof, because we've released tons of barrels of our strategic petroleum reserve in order to keep gas prices down. So I just I weigh in on the side of this that says things are more expensive for me now than they were before, and it doesn't seem like we're doing any better in the energy production department. But I want to get into that. I want to really kind of dig into this, because I think it's important, right? We got to talk about what's going on with liquid natural gas and the outcomes, right? The outcomes of Biden's policies, which in my opinion have not been good. But I want to talk with Frank Lasee. He's president of Truth in Energy and Climate, and he's a former state senator in Wisconsin. Frank Lasee, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me on.
You bet. So let's talk a little bit about liquid natural gas and what John Podesta had to do with it. And maybe you could help us get to the bottom of the debate, where some on the left say that we're producing more energy than we've ever produced before, and others are saying, no, we're not. We're dying. What's going on, Frank?
Well, interestingly, we are producing a huge amount of energy, or oil and natural gas, and it could be growing even faster. And this is against the headwinds of the Biden administration, against them cutting off federal lands where the federal government gets the royalties rather than private people. And the government desperately needs money when they're $35 trillion in debt and $1 trillion a year in interest payments. And to get a little perspective, the world uses about 140 trillion cubic feet of natural gas every year. And the United States right now is exporting 12 billion cubic feet of natural gas a day. And they're estimating that by 2030, we'll be exporting about 20 billion. What President Biden has done, and I think it's everything points to John Podesta, who's now going to take John Kerry's place as the climate czar and run around the world in a private jet, jawboning, trying to cut back on fossil fuel use. It really does provide
Fantastic.
the hypocrisy is amazing.
Yeah.
But it provides, we need energy. Energy is what makes everything we eat, buy, consume, do, watch Netflix, use the computer, talk to you on the phone right now. All of those things use a lot of energy, and Americans use more energy than anyone else. And we have better lifestyle on average than anywhere else because of that energy. So by cutting it back and making it more difficult, the prices go up. We're paying more because of Biden's policies. And now what he's done is put a hold on, and maybe permanently, the building of 10 more LNG export terminals. And each one of those hubs means about $18 billion of local investment, about 7,000 multi-year construction jobs, a lot of them union, high-paying jobs to build these huge plants. And then it means that natural gas isn't going to go to Europe and Japan. That's where the majority of ours goes. Somebody else, like the Russians and the Iranians, are going to fulfill those orders, or they're going to turn to coal, which India and China are already building literally hundreds and hundreds of coal plants. They are opening more coal mines. There's coal use all around the world. So even for saving the climate, supposedly what this is for, which it does nothing for at all, it actually has the opposite effect because we have the cleanest natural gas harvesting in the world. So they're going to use dirtier natural gas from Iran and Russia, our adversaries, funding them to do more bad things in the world. On no level is this good for anyone. It's not good for Americans. It's not good for it's not good for our allies, but it's certainly good for Russia and Iran. So I guess it is good for somebody.
And that's, I guess, my follow-up question to that is, if we're pausing these exports on liquid natural gas because of Podesta's influence, then is this purely political? Is it to enrich our enemies like Russia and China, or is there another plausible reason that is escaping me?
It's his brother. I think John Podesta has outside influence, and also Biden is being pushed to do more for the climate. And these climate-crazed people out there, and that's a large constituency of the left and of the Democrat Party, and folks, you really got to be watching out for this because it's all one of the parts of their whole crazy woke agenda is to cut off our energy supply and to help regular people. No sane person would go on a diet and cut out 80% of their food just overnight or constrict it without having a new supply. And wind and solar cannot fulfill the needs we have. We aren't building it fast enough, even if it could. So, it's very expensive. Paying for a full-time, keep the lights on, natural gas, coal, and nuclear electric grid, and adding part-time wind and solar that you can't depend on. No matter how much we add, we still have to keep the full-time on if we want to have the lights on like it's really cold and really hot. So there's a lot of bad policies in here. And I think that part of it is satisfying the climate crazed. And they're wrong, by the way. They're wrong. The NOAA and NASA cook the temperature books. They've gone back and adjusted the historical data. They've added a degree and a half of temperature around the world in the United States. Literally, they've added the degree and a half they're all complaining about we shouldn't get to. It's just made up. So we're doing it we're doing it for a lie, first off. So we're doing this crazy stuff, and then we're borrowing money that we don't have to rack up a national debt, and then we're incentivizing and buying 80% of it is made and created in China, and they've got a lock on virtually all this green stuff. 80% of the solar panels are there made. 80% of the internal workings of the giant wind towers are made. They need a lot of different metals. The batteries are made in China. Graphite is solely sourced out of China now. I mean, it's really not benefiting America at all, and it's helping our adversary China and Russia and Iran. And this is the policy of the left.
Now, Frank Lasee, as much as I like you, I've been hearing that there's been a very minuscule increase in temperatures, this degree and a half you're talking about, for a number of years now. And I always thought this was gospel truth, and it just was an insignificant increase. You're saying that it's not even an increase?
I don't believe it's an increase at all. If you look at the raw data from places that aren't in the city, what's going on is they've used, as cities grow, is well-known fact, nobody disputes it. It's called the urban heat island effect, and we've all experienced it. You drive out in the country, it's cool. It's 70, 80 degrees. You drive into the city, it's 6 to 10 degrees hotter. That's because they don't have trees, no grass, the buildings, the air conditioning, the cement and everything. So there's an urban heat island effect. They have a majority of their temperature stations in urban areas that used to be rural areas. So as they've grown up, they've added all this heat. And then what they do is they homogenize it. They say this is their excuse for changing it. So what they do is they warm the country rural ones that haven't gotten hotter conflating the ones that are now urban that used to be rural. They're doing this across the world. They're doing it all over the world, and they're mainly at airports. That's another part. They're at airports. What do you think happens at the Miami airport? How does it compare to the temperatures in 1950 at the Miami airport? It doesn't take a lot of critical thinking to go, wait a minute, there's not something right with this. It is warmer now than it was in 1850, and thank goodness it's warmer than the little ice age, also known as pre-industrial times that are supposed to be so wonderful. And it was warmer back when the Vikings settled Greenland. It was green there. It was 1,000 years ago when trees were growing in Alaska underneath glaciers. Now they're coming up 1,000 years ago. We're finding these things around the world are coming out from underneath glaciers. Well, they got there. People didn't dump them on top of the glaciers. They were there before the glacier came. And now we're seeing them again. So they've been lying to us, creating hysteria because it's part of a larger global agenda. And the leftists in our country and across Europe and Canada, they've gotten a hold of our governments, and they're putting the globalist leftist agenda, the crime in the cities you're talking about, part of the leftist agenda. Make them all angry at each other, get you frustrated enough, start shooting each other. This is all part of it. So they can tear us down to gain control is what they really want to do.
Wow. So they're telling folks to not have kids. They're telling people to eat bugs for protein, stop eating meat, and stop farting. And that's somehow going to save the planet, and they're making it all up. Folks, we're on with Frank Lasee, president of Truth in Energy and Climate, former state senator out of Wisconsin. We're going to continue with him straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue our conversation with Frank Lasee. He is former state senator in Wisconsin and president of Truth in Energy and Climate. And Frank, if all of this happens with the Podesta brothers' plan to curtail this the exports of liquid natural gas, what will that do to emissions overall?
Well, emissions will go up around the world because we've overregulated our energy market here. Something else the greenies want, and oil and natural gas here costs more to extract. That's why it's just an added cost, so it drives up the cost. In other places like Russia and Iran and the Middle East, they flare a lot more natural gas when they're harvesting it, and they lose a lot more because they just have so much of it. And if it's not economical, you just lose it into the air. So they're using a lot dirtier natural gas that's harvested that way. And worldwide, we're using 8.5 billion tons of coal, and the communist Chinese are using more than half of that. And we're going to see more coal usage as well if there's not enough LNG coming on the market to satisfy worldwide demand. Regardless of what the greenies like or want or care about, 2.8 billion people live in China and India, and they literally have almost maybe 1 billion people that need a lot more electricity. And they're going about getting it, and the vast majority of that they're going to get from coal. So as John Kerry, our climate envoy, our climate gadfly in a private jet has told us, no matter what we do, even if we go to zero, it matters not at all. And China has more emissions, if that's important. They have more real pollution, is actually because they don't use clean coal technology.
Right.
So they have more pollution, but they have more emissions than all the developed countries in the world, including the U.S., put together. So all of the rest of the developed world emits less CO2 than China. So when we drive up our electric costs, and it's going on in Germany right now because their electric costs, and this is our future unless we change course, folks, so this upcoming November is hugely important. They're paying triple what we're paying on electricity, and it hasn't even stopped going up. they're going to pay quadruple or quintuple, or I don't even know the end in sight, because they haven't even built out all their wind and solar. That truly costs more, folks. It's the other big lie. Wind and solar costs us a lot more. Think about it. If you got a solar car that only worked when the sun shined, could you get rid of your full-time car? So now your car costs just went up. They just went up. And their answer is, well, buy 2, buy 3. Well, now buy a wind car. Well, you can't even take a wind car to work or to the kids' soccer game because you might not get home. So you got to keep your full-time car and keep paying for it. Then you got to keep paying for the rest. And make the analogy even more, you have to build garages for all of them and pay for that too, because you have to build transmission wires to all over the heck to place to take the wind and solar power from where it's being produced to the cities where it's needed, because you don't want to put those solar plants that raise the temperature. There's another thing. Wind and solar both raise the temperature. Harvard study out. If we built out the 400,000 wind towers we'll need for our electric grid, the way the Greens claim, it'll raise our temperatures by about 0.5 degree across the country. All those solar panels, and now in Wisconsin, they're building 2 square miles of solar panels. It's the first installment of 10 square miles of solar panels. When all those are up and it's a hot, sunny day, they're going to raise the temperature by 20 to 30 degrees. Now, it's not a big deal when it's rooftop, but it adds to that urban heat island effect that is driving up the temperatures that NOAA reports to us. But when you have 10 square miles of solar panels, the heat rolling off of that, the heat. Now, wait a minute. We're not supposed to be, we're heating the world to cool the world, to save the world from overheating. It's the crazy lefty world that we're living in. The other part is water vapor. Water vapor is the most important abundant greenhouse gas. We don't talk about it. It's ignored. It's pretended as if it doesn't exist. It is. There's no disputing that. The IPCC, everyone who really understands this stuff knows water vapor is driving our greenhouse effect. Major and most important, NASA will tell us that. It's 50 times more abundant than methane or than CO2, 50 times more than CO2. It's 10,000 times more abundant than methane. And they're using methane to cut back on cows and on farming. And now here, listen to this. It's 60,000 times more abundant than nitrous oxide. 60,000 times more abundant in the atmosphere. The nitrous oxide that they're using it as an excuse to cut back on fertilizer that feeds half the world. These people have an anti-human agenda. They want to drive your food costs up, your energy costs up, make them short so they can ration them and give us CO2 ration cards, like a credit card. When you run out of enough CO2 rations, you can't buy beer at the end of the month. You can't buy anything except for bugs that they might want to get you to get used to.
That is crazy stuff. Now, I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to keep up with you and all the work you're doing at Truth in Energy and Climate. So, Frank Lasee, let everybody know how they can follow you, what your website is, and what your social media handles are.
Yeah, it's truthinenergyandclimate.com, and it's the same handles on Facebook and Instagram and on Twitter. And we have a weekly email newsletter on energy and climate. We do some unique things in there that you'll find of interest. So you can go to our website and sign up there, truthinenergyandclimate.com.
All right, truthinenergy.com, truthinenergyandclimate.com. Frank Lasee is the president. Make sure you check him out. Folks, we're coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So a couple of years back, New York Times runs an op-ed, and the title of the op-ed is Why Being a Foster Child Made Me a Conservative. Now, if you think that's a pretty attention-grabbing headline, I think you'd be right. The author of that is Rob Henderson. He's a columnist and an author. He's written a book called Troubled, a memoir of foster care, family, and social class, and he's our guest now. Rob Henderson, welcome, sir.
Hi, Rich. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Sounds like a great American success story. Started out, rough, but ends really well. Let's talk a little bit about the attention that you caught when you wrote this New York Times op-ed. Why did you write it, and what was some of the reaction you got?
Yeah, well, it was these were ideas that were swirling in my mind ever since I left home. I grew up in foster care. I was born into poverty. My mother was addicted to drugs, and that was why I was placed into care. Never knew my father. A lot of drama and catastrophe and tragedy throughout my early life, which I describe in Troubled. And I fled as soon as I could. I enlisted in the Air Force when I was 17. And once my life started to turn around and my future got a bit brighter, I started to think about the factors that contributed to my relative success, especially in comparison to how things could have gone. And in that op-ed, I concentrate on the two factors of family stability and personal responsibility. I describe the periods in my early life when I had a somewhat stable home life and parents or parental figures who would look out for me, and that's when my life was relatively stable, and that's when I had some good role models. And then later, the decision to join the military and start to take responsibility for my own life and my own future, instead of blaming others or pointing the finger or figuring out who was responsible for my misfortunes. Taking that sort of complete ownership over my future, that also led me to succeed in the military and then later find my way into college.
I got to tell you, remarkable. A couple of years ago, I met somebody who was a tech entrepreneur and had started a nonprofit because somebody had hit him with a statistic that blew him away, and then he shared that statistic with me. And I don't think it's changed. It's been pretty steady, remarkably consistent for a number of years or even a number of decades. And the statistic is this, that 80% of kids that come out of the foster care system end up incarcerated or homeless. And I was shocked at this number. I had no idea. I figured that might be the fate for some. I didn't think it was that high. And it might even be higher today than it was a couple of years ago when it was shared with me. And in looking at the information on my show sheet for your book and for this interview, it says that op-ed that you wrote in the New York Times, it ran the same day that you graduated from Yale University. And going to any university is not something that many expect kids in foster care to do, let alone going and graduating from Yale. What was different for you that you were able to hold on to these beliefs that you were just sharing, and that you believed in personal responsibility, and how did all that happen? How did you beat the odds?
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I cite this statistic in that op-ed and in the book as well, that only 3% of foster kids graduate from college. And, just as by way of comparison, 11% of kids from families in the bottom income quintile graduate from college. So in other words, a child born into a poor family in the U.S. is 4 times more likely to graduate from college than a child in foster care. And so the odds really are against you. There were some factors in place that maybe, that there weren't many options as far as like modifying or manipulating or changing them. I was always kind of a naturally curious kid, but I was so weighed down by the really difficult experiences of my early life. And so, a point that I try to make in the book is that even if you have a kid who's kind of reflective and curious and academically inclined, if, I was moving homes every 6 months, changing schools all the time, there was a lot of adoption and separation and divorce and drama. And with all of that swirling in the background, I just didn't have the stability in place and the predictability for my latent potential to shine through. And it wasn't until later in the military where that was able to express itself, those good parts of myself and my good traits. And then, along the way, picking up good advice from mentors, from role models. There was one reason I joined the Air Force was because I had a male teacher, a history teacher, who kind of picked up on the fact that I was a sharp kid, even though I wasn't doing homework and even though I was kind of unfocused in class. He pulled me aside and he was like, look, you and I both know you're not going to college. You're barely passing this class. Wow. But here, take a look at this. And he showed me a picture of himself in his military uniform from back when he was in the service. And I looked at that and I thought, hey, that looks pretty cool. And so that planted the idea in my mind of, that was an option for me. And so I think small moments like that, if you see a kid who has some potential, just, giving him some good ideas and, kind of nudging him along, away from detrimental outcomes and maybe towards something more productive.
Be the person that gives a damn. It's really good advice, and too few people do that today. Folks, we're on with Rob Henderson. He's a columnist and author of the book Troubled, a memoir of foster care, family, and social class. We're going to continue our conversation with his journey through the foster care system and into writing this book and coming up with ideas that seem very logical, yet are hard to believe for someone that came from a really difficult circumstances he did. So, Rob Henderson, stick with us. America, we're coming right back. If you want to join the program, 833-482-5337 is the phone number. Open Phone America is coming up at the top of the next hour. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Rich Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
It's quite an American dream, the success story that we're talking about right here. Rob Henderson comes up out of a foster care system, makes it into Yale University. Now he writes books and he writes articles, and it's a tremendous story. The book is Troubled, a memoir of foster care, family, and social class. And Rob Henderson, there are a number of ideas that you label as luxury beliefs, right? Coming out of the Air Force, you suggest that these ideas and opinions really confer status on the upper class while inflicting the costs on the less fortunate. And I think that's a great way of putting it, because I agree with that. Ideas like defunding the police or being healthy at every size, what I like to say, glorifying fatness. And this is coming from somebody that used to weigh 270 pounds. I get that idea where people are like, oh, you look good at that size. Yeah, but you're going to drop dead at 50, and that's the part nobody's talking about. Or saying that marriage is just an oppressive institution of the patriarchy. And we hear these things so often. How did your beliefs on these ideas not go the way of most at Yale?
Well, when I arrived on campus, Rich, at Yale, this was 2015. I had just served 8 years in the military, so I was a little bit older than a lot of the other students on campus.
Yeah,
I'd lived a very different life than many of them. There's a statistic I cite in the book that there are more students from families in the top 1% of the income scale than the entire bottom 60% at Yale and most other elite universities in the U.S. And so, they just had a completely different upbringing than me and were more sheltered than I was, quite frankly. And so not only my experiences in the foster homes and growing up in these kind of poor and working class areas, and then joining the Air Force when I was 17, get to campus, and suddenly I'm seeing the sons and daughters of millionaires describe how unsafe they felt because someone sent a mean email or someone used the wrong term or made some kind of remark that would be perfectly acceptable in just about every other corner of American society, but in elite institutions, things like, it's good to call the police if there's a crime going on. I mean, after 2020, that has become a controversial statement, that it's actually good to have law enforcement and to contain violence and crime and looting and shoplifting, and that it's good. I mean, as an ideal, it's good for kids to be raised in two-parent families. And look, I'm well aware that there are exceptions, and I knew people who were raised by single moms. A lot of my friends growing up were raised in single-parent homes. I, for a time, was raised by a single mom. So I know that life is messy and people are complicated, but it's just a fact that statistically, if you want the best outcome for a kid, to have a sort of stable two-parent home is the best way to set a kid up for success. And so, I would hear students at these institutions, Yale and others, say that, they thought marriage was an outdated, oppressive institution. And then I would learn that they themselves had been raised by two parents. They planned to carry this forward for their own kids, but their official public position was that, we need to dismantle the, this oppressive, monogamous commitments and, move towards something beyond that. And it was just newfangled and strange to me. So I coined this term luxury beliefs. And a core feature of a luxury belief is that the believer is sheltered from the consequences of his or her belief. And so, if you implement, these policies and ideas, defunding the police, discarding the importance of marriage, of, all of these kinds of, strange and provocative ideas, if you are in a gated community and everyone around you went to college and you live in a low crime area and so on and so forth, you can bear the cost of, having these ideas and can shield yourself from them when they are implemented, and the rest of society gets to deal with rising crime rates and deteriorating families and so on and so forth.
Outstanding. It really is a remarkable story. And I want to continue and wrap up with you and let everybody know how they can get a copy of the book. Folks, we're on with Rob Henderson. He's the author of Troubled, a memoir of foster care, family, and social class. We're coming right back with him. Then we're getting to your calls at the top of the hour. Again, the phone number is 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Across America to the liberty-loving Latino, Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
America, welcome back. Riveting story here, honestly. A real, I want to say, rags to riches, American dream type of story of Ryan Henderson, author of Troubled, a memoir of foster care, family, and social class. Ryan Henderson, in the couple of minutes we have remaining, I want you to give the listeners a real good understanding of what they can walk away from the book with.
Well, there are a few different strands and ideas that I communicate in the book, but one of the main ones is the importance of stability for kids. The first half of the book mostly concentrates on my upbringing in foster homes and in really unstable family situations. And so that's one piece of it. And then the second would be the importance of understanding class divides in the U.S. So there's a lot of focus, I think, on Democrat versus Republican or black versus white or these different factions that we pay a lot of attention to, liberal versus conservative, but there's not a lot of attention paid to class. Differences between working class and upper middle class, educated people versus people who didn't go to college. I'm talking about formally educated. There's different kinds of education, I understand, but college educated. And that life looks very different for people who didn't take that path, and that there are different ways to live a fulfilling life, and that you don't necessarily have to take the path that I took. And, I had 5 close friends growing up. I didn't want this to just be that kind of bootstraps story, the rags to riches idea that you mentioned earlier. I mean, there is that in the book, of course, but I also describe 5 of my close friends growing up and that I went to high school with and where their lives ended up. And these guys were, they were not necessarily the most interested in, class and schoolwork and all this kind of stuff. Like, no matter what environment you place them in, it's not necessarily clear to me that they would have gone on to achieve, astounding academic success. But I did have 2 friends who went to prison, and then I had 1 friend who was shot to death. And I do think that if they had had different upbringings and had been raised with different kinds of values and had had different adults around them with different priorities, yeah, maybe they wouldn't have gone to college, but I don't think that they had to go to prison. I don't think they had to be murdered. I think they could have had fulfilling lives in other ways other than education, which is we tend to focus on that a lot in this country. And yes, it worked for me, and it can work for certain people, but I don't think it should be for everyone.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Everything has to be approached with a grain of salt and lots of common sense. Now, let everybody that's listening know how they get a copy of the book. What's the best way to get a copy of the book? How do they follow the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, of course, you can get it at any bookstore and online as well. So, wherever books are sold. You can also read excerpts of my book and commentary and so on on my website, robkhenderson.com. I also release weekly posts and ideas and thoughts. And yeah, I mean, I've been writing now for a few years. Ever since receiving my PhD, I've sort of gone in this more independent writing direction. And yeah, I've managed to build something of an audience, and people seem to be connecting with this work, especially people who themselves have experienced some social mobility and who also maybe feel a little bit alienated and like outsiders when they enter these environments where people are attempting to defy conventional wisdom with their luxury beliefs. And I think that this framework that I've developed helps people to understand what's going on.
And are you on social media where people are able to, follow the work you're doing, or is it just the website or the book?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can follow me on Twitter/X. So my handle is Rob K. Henderson, and on Instagram as well, Rob K. Henderson.
And final thing I'd like you to share with us is, for everybody that's listening that's found themselves in your position, right? Somebody who came up in foster care, might be in foster care right now. The audience is very vast on this program. What's your word of advice, maybe not singular advice, but most prominent advice for somebody that is facing those types of adversities?
Yeah, I mean, I would attempt, so just very sort of practically in concrete terms, try to find at least one older sort of mentor somewhere. It could be a coach or a teacher or just someone who you trust and who seems to have your best interest in mind, and try to stick with that person as best you can. Even if you're moving to different homes or different schools or what have you, it just helps to have one adult around or one mentor around who you can trust and communicate with. And this is a consistent finding in research that one of the predictors of a kid who's growing up in instability is having that one mentor can really help a great deal. And yeah, other than that, to try to imagine what your future would look like, and if the decisions you're making now will help you to construct a firm bridge to that future. That was another reason why personally I enlisted. I know the military isn't for everyone, but for me, when I considered when I was 17, what is my life going to look like when I'm 21 if I'm continuing on the path that I'm on now? And I knew it didn't look good. And so I figured, that was one way to sort of redirect my trajectory.
Folks, get a copy of the book, Troubled, a memoir of foster care, family, and social class. The author, Rob Henderson, is he's a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. And Rob, I thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Rich.
You bet. Folks, we continue with more straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, your liberty-loving Latino amigo. Happy to be here with you on this Wednesday evening. The phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. It's technically already Thursday where I am, but, you know, I'm not much of a technocrat. I'm using that improperly, but hey, anyway, welcome to the show. And I want to talk about a number of things tonight. We're going to go through some of the audio that we have here, but I also want to talk about a story, a particular story of Karine Jean-Pierre, right? Karine Jean-Pierre is upset that the New York Times has lost their journalistic objectivity. And she says that it's in question because they wrote a story about President Biden's health. Now, of course, President Biden's health comes into question all the time. But when the New York Times does it, well, you can't. Kind of sounds like Hunter Biden laptop. What are you, misinformation guru from the Russians? Are you working for Vlad? Are you living your life making bad decisions? Is he going to eulogize you in the paid Russian television? I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. But I do know that Karine Jean-Pierre and her boss, Joe Barboso Biden, they seem to be getting their, is it okay to say panties in a bunch or panties in a twist? Because it seems like that's what's going on there. And, I mean, come on. You got to do better. You got to do better. I mean, everybody and their mother is questioning Joe Biden's mental fitness. I think you've just got to come up with a better response than blaming the journalists or even the pseudo-journalists at the New York Times for questioning what's going on with his health, right? But anyway, here's a little clip from Karine Jean-Pierre. Listen to this.
The publisher of the New York Times has talked about getting flack from the White House for its coverage of the president's age. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you think is sort of fair game when covering the nation's oldest president and what might be off limits?
So, look, I mean, a couple of things there that I would say on that particular item. Look, you know, and, you know, you all ask me pretty regularly about the president's age, and we lay out what our perspective is. We lay out what we've seen this president do in the last 3 years, which is deliver on historic piece of legislation that's going to change the lives of Americans for generations to come. Now to your question more specifically about the New York Times coverage, is that display what we believe a journalistic objectivity about coverage of the president's age speaks to why we agree with former New York Times public editor Margaret Sullivan. And she says maybe the Times and other major media outlets ought to look in the mirror. Self-scrutiny and course correction are not among their core strengths. And I'll leave it there.
Oh, course correct. Anyway, yeah, so Karine Jean-Pierre basically says they're the ones that are wrong, yada, 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 yada. Now, I don't know. I don't know who's wrong here. I think the Times should be doing that. I think KJP has a responsibility to lie through her teeth to protect her president, right? It's kind of her job. But she's got to be better at it than just throwing a little shade here and there. I think she needs to really make the case, you know. I would say, you know, how many people in their 80s can fall up a flight of steps, get up and not skip a beat, keep going? How many guys, you know, falling off their bicycle, get right back on and eat some ice cream? You know, make light of it. Do a little Reaganism if you can, you know, and really just continue to point out his virility and say, you know what, how many guys in their 80s that are president do you know that have dogs getting kicked off the White House grounds because they're biting everybody? Where do you think those dogs are? That's right there at Biden's Rehoboth Beach House. And when he's there on the weekends at the beach house, he's there with these vicious dogs, and he's as virile as can be, running along the beach alongside Commander and all the rest of them. Right? You've got to try and dress it up a little bit better rather than, I think, just blaming the reporter for asking questions and saying, hey, your journalistic integrity is a thing. So, I don't know. Maybe that's my thought. You let me know if I'm wrong on that. But there's much to be discussed there. I also want to bring your attention to a particular story. This one's interesting, right? Let's see. This is somebody who's clearly not right in their head. Listen to this. Syracuse mom blends in with students, bursts into daughter's classroom, and breaks teacher's nose in front of 25 kids. This is a piece in the New York Times. We've got some audio to go along with this. Check this out.
31-year-old Lenzina Sutton has been ordered by the court to stay away from a teacher at Lincoln Middle School after being accused of bypassing school security and hitting the teacher multiple times last Friday morning. Sutton was arrested Friday on assault and battery charges. Her bail was set at $5,000 cash. The teacher was taken to the hospital. Onondaga County District Attorney Bill Fitzpatrick says from what he understands is that a number of students in a classroom witnessed the assault. He says the teacher has broken facial bones from being hit in the face, and her nasal passages were severely affected.
It's disturbing to me that she was able to enter the school. The security is ineffective unless it's absolute. It gets tedious, it's monotonous, it can be boring. But unless you're vigilant 24/7, it's meaningless. And I don't know what happened here. I hope it never happens again. And I'm sure that, Delaware is going to have to, or Lincoln, is going to have to address that.
It's Ashley Cafaro, News Channel 9.
So this Syracuse mom, like the report just indicated, she busted into her daughter's classroom, repeatedly punched her teacher in the face, breaking several bones, and at least 25 horrified kids looked on, according to the police report. And the name Lenzina Sutton, 31 years old, arrived at Lincoln Middle School on Friday with her mother, Roxanne Tompkins, and both of them attempted to make their way past security. Now, the day before, Ms. Sutton's daughter had told her teacher, "My mom will handle this," after she was disciplined for allegedly lying about her whereabouts during the school day. Oh, yeah. So she cut class, got in trouble, and she said, "I'm telling my mama." Now, Sutton then headed to her, Now, while Tompkins was prevented from entering the school the next morning, Sutton, who is much shorter, listen to this, I can't say weighing in, but measuring in at 4 feet 10 inches, Ms. Sutton had her hood pulled over her head and was able to blend in with the other kids. You can't make this stuff up. Sutton then headed into her daughter's classroom, proceeded to punch the female teacher in the face as traumatized students looked on. Oh, my goodness. This is something. Now, the victim was described as a dedicated veteran educator, suffered a concussion, broken bones in her face, as well as bruising, and she's going to have some long-term issues that you heard there in the report. And I can tell you, my nasal passages are always kind of screwed up, and nobody's punched me in the face. Imagine, having to go through all that. Sutton managed to leave the school after the beating, but was later arrested and charged with burglary and assault. The shocking incident spurred the Syracuse School District, Anthony Davis, and the police chief, Joe Cecile, to hold a joint press conference on Tuesday, saying this: "When people are dedicating their lives to educating our students, they shouldn't have to worry about this." Now, listen, I think I agree with that. No teacher should show up to work thinking, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to get punched in the face." Although I think there's an unwritten rule that you're dealing with people's children, and watch out, because parents will take things seriously and personally when it comes to their children. So I think that's always you get upset with your waiter, you flip him the bird, you don't give him a tip. But when you get upset with somebody that's, teaching your kid, you might be a little more aggressive in your protest, if you will. So I'm wondering, Radio Land, have you ever beat a teacher up? You ever snuck into a school and, put a beating on a teacher for what they did to your kid? What's your opinion on this? I think the lady's out of control. I don't think you're allowed to go into schools and beat on anybody. But interesting, nonetheless, that, at some point they felt this was the right thing to do. I'm going to go in there and set you straight. So curious on this one, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. No hair, no care, and live on the air. It's Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. And I'm looking forward to getting your opinions on this because we've had a number of topics tonight, whether it was the topic of the young man that grew up in foster care, went to the United States Air Force, and then graduated from Yale University and has a PhD now and is writing books about it, or the mom that went into the school, sneaking into the school because she's short enough to pass as a student and had her hoodie up so nobody could see her face. I want to talk about that. Plus, of course, we had a great conversation with Lou Dobbs earlier about lots of things, just really the state of affairs in the United States, and you can catch him at CPAC this week. But I want to get your thoughts and opinions on everything that's going on. Let's go to Watertown, New York, WTNY. Let's check in with Trixie. Trixie, how are you? You're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Hey, Rich, how are you? Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, I was calling to just give an opinion about the mother who snuck into school.
Of course. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking, what is she teaching her child, by her reaction and what she's doing, instead of supporting the teacher in there being some kind of consequence for skipping school or whatever the case was, not going. She's teaching her child, first of all, violence, and, it's bad parenting, just bad parenting.
I agree. And, growing up, I was taught that there's no such thing as bad kids, there's bad parents. And people always argue that with me, but I've tried to raise my kids under that impression so that, realizing it always comes back to me in one way or another. And I got to tell you, I tend to lose my head often, or at least did. I'm a lot better now. And I don't even think it's age. I just think I matured late in life. And there's many a time where I think that's called for, even though I know it's wrong. But I got to say, you're right. I don't know what grade this was. I think I read it in the article, but it's not something you do. You don't sneak into a school and start beating up the teacher unless the teacher, somehow assaulted your child. And I think just disciplining a child or saying that, they're in trouble for X, Y, and Z is no reason to go and literally start punching someone in the face, right? Clearly uncalled for, absolutely wrong. And I think you're right. It sets a horrible example for her daughter. Her daughter now thinks that when she says, my mom's going to take care of this, the expectation is that the mom is going to go in there and beat somebody down. And come on, really, come on. Is that what we're trying to do here? We're just going to create a generation of very, very problematic people and a shrinking population. I mean, because people are eventually going to be like, if this is what's going to happen, I don't want to be here, right? They're going to move away, try and go somewhere better. So I think you're right on that front, Trixie. Thank you for your call. Big shout out to everybody listening on WTNY, Watertown, New York. Let's see. We have time. We're allowed to continue. I love it. Let's go to Jeff, Lansing, Michigan, WILS. Go right ahead.
Mr. Valdez, and that's Valdez with an S, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. How are you, man?
Yeah. I was calling about your question before, if anybody's ever beat up a teacher. No, I never beat up a teacher, but I was a disrespectful young little puke when I was in school. Yeah. And I had this one teacher, Mr. Clark. He didn't like me. I didn't like him. And it was just, I made his everyday job of having me in his class a living hell. I really did. And this is back in the days of Cheech and Chong, and Tommy Chong addressing Sergeant Stadenko. And so Clark comes into the room, and I look at him and I said, "Oh, wow, look at your hair, man." And he literally came across the room. He just dragged me out of my desk chair, took me out in the hallway, slammed me up against the locker doors, and I can't repeat the words that he used on a radio show. But I'm telling you what, he taught me a lesson. I never was a bad kid in his class. And
that's great.
After that day, and I had another teacher that I ran my mouth too much, and he literally taped my mouth closed with duct tape.
Oh, this is so good. I don't know how old you are, but I'm 45, and I had some teachers that they weren't this bad, but they weren't afraid. That's for sure, Jeff. I could share a couple of war stories here with you. I had a teacher, probably 4th and 5th grade. And these guys were like the guys that were outside in the schoolyard, making sure everybody did what they had to do, and made sure you were in line in the morning. It was a handful of them, right? I think the homeroom teacher was a guy named Jerry Banker. He was a really good guy, but he was tough. And the other two guys were really tough. A black guy, his name was Lasee Shaw, and he had like a very small little afro, but nice guy, like the gazelle glasses, and a heck of a guy, always smiling, but he was serious when he had to be. And the other guy was always serious. His name was Marty Benowitz, and white guy, had like a mullet, really nice guy as well. And I got along with them, and they both had a good demeanor and a good sense of humor. But every now and again, when I would get a little crazy, get out of line, and give a little attitude, these guys were no stranger to grabbing you by your bicep and squeezing you like you were their kid, and just manhandling you. And I remember thinking, if I tell my dad this happened, my dad's gonna squeeze me even harder than these guys. So definitely not doing that. And it was a different era, right? And people say we internalized trauma and we institutionalized abuse and all sorts of things. But I think it also institutionalized and internalized respect and a fear of healthy discipline. Anyway, those were some of my stories. And those guys were great teachers. Big shout to them. I don't even know if they're alive anymore, but if they are, thanks for your service. And we continue with the rest of your calls. We got calls from West Virginia, from Albany, New York, and more. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. We're doing Open Phone America with me, Rich Valdez. Don't go anywhere.
Well, Mr. Valdez, you have one of the greatest shows that radio's ever had.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Well, I mean, it is what it is, so it doesn't change the fundamental facts. There are four fundamental facts that Hunter Biden gets put on the board of Burisma. He's not qualified to be on the board. He gets put on that board and gets paid $1 million a year. Second, as I said, he's not qualified to be on the board. He said so himself. Third, in Dubai on December 4th, 2015, the executives at Burisma, Mr. Zolochevsky, Mr. Pizarski, specifically asked Hunter Biden, can you weigh in with D.C. and help us with the pressure we are facing from the prosecutor general in Ukraine? Hunter Biden makes a call. Devin Archer told us he made a call to his dad, to Joe Biden, And then 3 days later, Joe Biden goes to Ukraine and conditions the release of American tax money on the firing of the prosecutor, applying the pressure to the company that Hunter Biden sat on the board of. Those facts, they don't change regardless of what this confidential human source has said.
All right. Now, that is, of course, Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan from the United States House of Representatives explaining that whether the witness lied or not, it didn't change the facts of the case. And according to Jonathan Turley, a legal scholar writing in the New York Post, the lying witness doesn't exonerate the Bidens at all because, and as he puts it, Russian comedian Yakov Smirnov once joked that in America, you can always find a party. In Soviet Russia, the party can always find you. And this defendant they're talking about is Alexander Smirnov. He's not a comedian, but he is about to discover the truth of said statement, according to Turley, saying that Smirnov is now this defendant in federal court being charged by special counsel David Weiss for spreading a false story about Hunter Biden and receiving $5 million from Burisma. Of course, Burisma being the Ukrainian energy company where Hunter was on the board. The allegation produced a stampede of Democrats who saw this as, an indictment that clearly exonerated Biden, and that was that, saying that, no more. But others are saying that the charges revive this previously debunked story that Hunter Biden's laptop could be Russian disinformation. So, voila, we have a new story on our hands. I don't know which one you believe, but I can tell you that I think that Jim Jordan's on to something. That irrespective of this person being convicted of whatever and being a liar, it doesn't change the facts of what Hunter Biden actually did do, and this person corroborating that. So, but of course did lie. So I understand the detriment of it. The government also points out that Smirnov's admitted to having contacts with Russian intelligence officials and previously scheduled meetings with these figures to express that he is a flight risk. So I don't know what happens here, but interesting story about this. And earlier today, James Biden, who is the brother of President Biden, he was in the hot seat as well. And we have a little audio on that. Let me get cut number 20.
Obviously, James has already come forward and said that he didn't have any sort of, using his brother's name in any way to advance his own business interest. What did you make of his testimony?
I think he specifically said that he trusted Hunter. So he said his verification that the Chinese businesses that they were doing millions of dollars of deals with, that was, in his understanding, not related to the Chinese Communist Party. His verification of that was just asking Hunter a question.
So we have this response that it was simply just asking a question. I don't know if we buy that. James Biden said that Joe Biden was present for a call about this now bankrupt hospital firm, and the president's brother is saying that it allegedly got fleeced. So this is his younger brother, James Biden. He says that back then, the future president, who was sitting next to him on a call about this currently bankrupt hospital business, they got had, according to a new report, that this all happened with connections to what Hunter Biden was doing with a particular Chinese businessman in July of 2017. And saying, I'm sitting here with my father, which many are saying was a shakedown text message, saying, look, I'll do this if you do that. Quid pro quo, Joe. Quid pro Joe. I don't know. Doesn't seem good to me. Anyway, Biden also met with the founder of AmeriCorps Health Enterprises before it went belly up. And at one point, he was penciled in for an equity stake. Now, current presidential physician, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, even participated in a business meeting at a Pennsylvania hospital with James Biden after the facility was acquired by AmeriCorps. So, yeah, listen, I'll get you the president's doctor. You just sign right here, sign on the dotted line, and the brand new facility they buy now, expanding who gets to go and who's who and what's what. I don't know, friends. I don't know, but if I had to guess, this sounds extraordinarily fishy to me. Anyway, I want to get to your calls. I see I left a few people on hold. Forgive me. Let's go to, let's see, who is it? Joe, Salem, Arkansas, KSAR. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rich, that story you read about beating up the teacher, boy, that brings back some memories. I was having trouble. My mother, she was a Jehovah's Witness at the time, and we grew up pretty passive. I got beat up all the time and made fun of and put out in the hall for every holiday party they had, and the teacher just absolutely didn't like the way I interacted or didn't interact with the other kids, and then they started picking on me. I was a little bitty guy then, and I grew up later. But my mother got tired of hearing about it, went down to school and told the principal, I'm going to go down and talk to this teacher. And when she got down there, she, sixth grade teacher named Mrs. Tim, T-Y-M, she says he'll never amount to anything because he's nonconformist. He's got a OCD, and he tells the kids all the time the school's full of lies. There's no Santa Claus and all this kind of stuff. And so my mother said, well, listen, that's his beliefs. That's our beliefs. And I don't think the woman thought there would be any violence, but finally when she said I wouldn't amount to anything, that's when my mom had it. She raised her hand to her and she said, I'm going to knock your block off, and chased her down the hall, and the woman ran to the principal's office.
Wow.
And then we got to the stairway, and my mom says, you know what, I'm in trouble. Let's go. And we shuffled down the stairs to the ground floor and went through the park where I used to get beat up all the time to the house. She locked me in the house, said, and keep my purse until your dad gets home. I'm going to sit right here. Cops will be along. But they never did come. So that's basically, in a nutshell, the story about Mrs. Tim in my sixth grade class there. She was getting ready to bust her.
Amazing. I didn't think we were going to get a call like this tonight of somebody saying their mom actually went there to beat somebody up on their behalf. Amazing story, Joe in Salem, Arkansas, KSAR. The rest of your calls and more are coming up. We got Albany, New York coming up, Charleston, West Virginia. Let's see what else we have. A little KDKA action, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. Amigos, we continue with your calls. And let's see. Justin, Cumberland, Maryland, WCBC. Justin, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Yes, sir. I was just telling a little story. I moved from the ghetto to the sticks, and I was a little smart mouth, I'll admit it. And I got picked on in what I called the rich kids school, where they had a pool and they played all kinds of stuff and were kind of leisure. Well, I got hit in the face getting picked on with a soccer ball in the pool, so you couldn't really run after anybody. And then the fifth time I had jumped on somebody's chest in the pool and held them underwater and punched them in the face till I swelled their face up. And the teacher jumped in and thought that I was just making a big trouble. Well, when I told the whole story to her, the principal, they suspended me. I went home, and I didn't know. My grandfather got home before me, and he worked for Bethlehem Steel, and we were kind of poor. Well, when he found that out and he heard the whole story and saw it wasn't my fault, he called the school and he told them, if you have any problem again at that school and my boy is kicked out for somebody picking on him, I'm coming up and I'm going to whoop the principal's ass and the guidance counselor's ass because I can't afford to lose work.
I love it. How did they respond to that?
They said, yes, sir, Mr. Barber. Yes, sir, this. Yes, sir, that. The next day, I went right back to school because he told them he ain't missing a day or he ain't missing a class. And that's what happened.
Wow. It worked. Yeah, I tell you, it's amazing how things were so simple back in the days. You could just straighten things out. Now, people double down on them being wrong. And I understand two wrongs don't make a right, but real life is still real life. And at the end of the day, you can either be the guy punching someone else in the face or the guy getting punched in the face. And I'd rather not get punched in the face. And I'm not saying we should go punch anybody in the face, but I'm saying sometimes you just got to be tough and stand your ground. Justin, great call. I appreciate it. Big shout out to everybody in Cumberland, Maryland, WCBC. Let us continue with Linda in Albany, New York, WGDJ. Linda, go right ahead.
Oh, thanks for taking my call. I'll be quick, but I'll have to comment now. Two things. First, in school, and I was usually the quiet type behaving. This one day, everybody was chewing gum, it seemed like, in the one class, and I thought, what the heck, I think I will too. Well, then the teacher calls us all up to throw it in the can right next to her desk. So when I got home, I said, how come, to my mom, today was only the first and only time I chewed gum and, did something like that. And she said, well, that was the problem. The teacher figured by the time the quiet kids were getting in doing that stuff too, that she'd have to do something about it. So, but the main reason I was calling was thank you for having the things about the orphanages and people in them. I was a volunteer for a little while in one, and the kids go through so much. One child that I was helping there, he had seen his father murder his mother, and that's why he was in the orphanage.
Wow.
People don't realize, some of the things that they've had to deal with. So thank you for bringing the man on that was explaining some of the things that were happening.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Linda, it's always a pleasure to speak with these folks that have these interesting stories. And regarding the story you shared, I remember being a kid and somebody in a lower grade than me, I remember was the younger sister of like a friend of mine who was my age. And she was a cute little girl. And I saw her and she said hello because I knew who her brother was. And I was like, oh, how are you? And she was like, yeah, good. And again, if I was in 6th or 7th grade, she was like in 5th grade. And I was like, oh, you good? And I was like, all right, take care. And I don't know, I said something like, you should, teasing her. She was in front of her house. I was like, you should probably get home before you get in trouble. Your mom comes looking for you. And she said, she's like, oh no, my mom, my mom's dead. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. Sorry. I was like, well, your dad then. And she was like, well, no, my dad's in jail. And I was like, oh. I was like, why is your dad in jail? And she was like, oh, for killing my mom. And I was like so floored, right? That, there wasn't a joke being played on me. It was like, holy crap, this girl just dropped this bomb on me. And, I wasn't prepared for that. And, we don't realize what kids go through. So, similar story to yours. It's more common than I think many of us think, which is a sad thing. Linda, big shout out to you and everybody in Albany, New York, WGDJ. Coming back to the rest of your calls and more. Do not move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, Bobby, it's a speed round. Let's keep it short and sweet. Charleston, West Virginia, WCHS. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rich. Good talking to you. Hey.
Likewise.
There's one thing that's for sure. The people that are doing this sort of thing, they defy authority, and they have to exact revenge on people who catch them. So they do violence against the people to get even when they should actually put their hat in their hand and say, listen, I did wrong. And
you're talking about the mom that beat up the teacher?
Yes, I sure am. And I was also seeing the similarity between that and even people in the media, such as Fonnie Willis, where she goes before this church, gets an award, and basically acts the victim instead of actually going there and apologizing for taking a married man as a boyfriend and then hiring him when he's not even qualified to do the job, and then funneling all this money into his hands and then go out in all these junkets all over the place. She should be, some sort of contrition, you know what I'm saying? She should actually say, listen, I messed up. And, I understand getting even with people and stuff when you actually have righteous indignation, when somebody really does you wrong, go in there and smack them hard or something,
Well,
when
I think
nothing
that's
else
what
works.
I think you're right, Bobby, and I think that's what makes bad guys, right? That they do the wrong thing and they do it often and they do it without remorse or without any rhyme or reason to it, because they're not just responding or retaliating. They're just pretty much bad people. And I think that's the case here. She's looking for her own career. She's out to get Trump by hook or by crook. Doesn't matter if he's committed the crime. She's here to prosecute either way. Bobby in Charleston, West Virginia, WCHS. Thank you, sir. Let's go to Reading, Pennsylvania, WEEU, and check in with June. Quickly, go right ahead.
Hi, Rich. I just wanted to also thank you for your guests tonight. They were very informative, and great show, as usual. My comment had to do with the lady, which to me is just abhorrent. Such behavior. No wonder we have kids acting out the way they are. And also to let you know, I graduated in the great class of 69. And I was born and raised in Lancaster County, which is, a lot of farm country. But we had something similar to a caller before, a guy who his sole job was to go keep peace in the school, right? And his name, and I kid you not, was Mr. Warden, W-A-R-D-E-N, which was a bit of a joke behind his back. He actually looked like a prison warden, and he was built like an armored truck. And he would grab a guy and throw him up against the lockers. Now, he wouldn't use bad language with him, but boy, would he get in his face.
But he had to be tough. And June, forgive me, we're out of time, but it reminds me of some shop teachers I had. There was two brothers. One was a shop teacher, the other was a gym teacher. And both of these guys, they would curse up a storm and grab guys, and they weren't playing. Thank you, Linda. Big shout out to WEEU. And hasta la próxima. Until the next time, America, take care, good night, and God bless. I'm Rich Valdez.